Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. Once again, hope everybody is safe, sound, and virus-free. Thank you for watching. I had a question from someone after last night's video. The person is a high-risk individual. My understanding from that would mean they have a medical or several medical conditions that puts them at risk. Should they catch COVID-19, should they catch SARS-CoV-2 and have the disease COVID-19, that they're at risk for death. And they work in a customer-based business where the customers and the employees may not be wearing masks. Should they go to work? The first point of that would be to direct that question to your physician. Absolutely, that physician, your primary care physician, could help you with that answer. But on the face of it, if you're a high-risk individual, and even though you're wearing a mask to protect others. If other people are within 6 feet of you and not wearing a mask, and they are carriers, you will potentially catch that virus. And if you're at a high-risk situation, if you're a high-risk individual, you may die from that. So the answer is no. You should not be working in an environment that puts you at risk, period. Okay. Donald Trump was on TV today. President Trump was on TV today talking about vaccines. And he's very optimistic that we should have a vaccine by the end of the year. I will tell you that is very optimistic, and I would love for that to happen. Oxford University in England has been working on a vaccine before even COVID-19 became an issue. So they sort of had a head start on this type of vaccine, and so they were able to change format a little bit, but they still had a really good head start on moving forward with a vaccine for SARS-CoV-2. I still think it's very optimistic to have a vaccine as early as December, but I would be thrilled if that happened. The vaccines that they're working on are interesting. We have spoken many times about the structure of SARS-CoV-2. And we talked about the glycoproteins that are coming out of the virus. And the term that we use for those proteins are spikes. So there are spike proteins that are coming out of that virus. And we talked about those spike proteins and how they bind to the ACE2 receptors inside our body, particularly in our lungs and on blood vessels and things. And that's how the virus enters the cells, and then the virus is able to hijack those cells, and those cells then start making copies of the virus. And sometimes that cell will make as many as 10,000 to 100,000 copies of the virus before the cells break open and the virus spreads around the body to other cells. And those other cells then take in that virus through the ACE2 receptor. And those cells too then are hijacked. And the virus forces our cells to make copies of the virus, on and on and on. It's a scary thought, right? It's cunning, this virus. The vaccine development is focusing on the spike protein. the spike protein that sticks out from the virus and binds to the ACE2 receptor. So one field of one direction with vaccine development is to create a vaccine against the spike protein, so that whenever the immune system sees a spike protein, it attacks it. And if that spike protein is in the vaccine, well then the immune system will learn to recognize the spike protein should it come in any other form, such as the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and then attack that. That's one direction. Another direction other companies are taking is to create the spike protein and create benign viruses that won't make us ill, but change the virus so that that virus that is benign, that won't make us ill, expresses or manufactures on itself the spike protein. So if you took a common cold virus that never bothers us and allow it to make a spike protein, then our immune system will start fighting that spike protein and fighting that virus. And because it builds immunity against that spike virus on that benign virus, then it would kill off that benign virus, but also it'll recognize that spike protein on more dangerous viruses, such as SARS-CoV-2. Those are two main directions that vaccine manufacturers are going in. Multiple countries are working on a vaccine, obviously including the US. Whenever I watch the news, I look at it in the eyes of a physician, but I also try to look at it in the eyes of my patients and my community and the United States and the world. I try to look at it how you would see what's being told on the news. And it's overwhelming. It truly is overwhelming. Health-wise, it's overwhelming. Socially, it's overwhelming. Culturally, overwhelming. Financially, overwhelming. And I worry about all of you. How do we deal with it? And as a community physician, taking care of my patients, a lot of my patients are overwhelmed, and they're having anxiety issues, and they're having depression issues. A large part of my schedule during the day is helping people with their anxiety from this, whether they recognize it's from this or not. This being the pandemic that we're experiencing and the effects of the pandemic on the fears of health and the fears of financial issues. What I want to recommend is, as massive as this issue is, I want to try to make it small. I want to make it so small that you can deal with it, that you can cope with it, that it's not overwhelming. I want to give an example of something. In the news, prior to the news being hijacked by COVID-19, I remember hearing about this huge collection of plastic in the oceans, which is terrible. I mean, huge. Such a massive floating field of garbage that was the size of Texas or larger than the size of Texas. Made up of plastic and water bottles, mainly water bottles, plastic water bottles. And so what I thought is, I can't go out there and clean the ocean, but I could do something small. And I could get rid of water bottles from my own use. So now in the office, instead of having water bottles, we have a 5-gallon water bottle that we get and we drink from, as opposed to everybody having individual water bottles. And with just our office doing that, is that going to stop that huge amount of plastic floating around the ocean? And the answer is no. But if we do it, and you do it, and someone else does it, and it keeps spreading that way, eventually we change the situation. One plastic water bottle less at a time. We have a virus that is killing the weaker in our society. That's killing people over 65. That's killing people with diabetes. That may or may not be affecting children. We're still trying to figure that all out about this Kawasaki-like disease. But how do I try not to kill one other person with this virus? Well, I wear a mask. I wear a facial covering. I am only one person, but I know by what we understand about this virus that if I wear a facial covering, that I'm not going to spread it to the 2 to 3 people that the average person spreads COVID or coronavirus to. In other words, for every person that's a carrier that's not wearing a facial covering, that person's carrying it or exposing 2 to 3 people with that. And if those 2 to 3 people don't wear a facial covering, they're exposing 2 to 3 people each with that. I try not to drink water from a water bottle because I don't want to add to the problem. I wear a facial covering because I don't want to add to the problem. Are there issues wearing a facial covering? Is it comfortable? No. Is it cool? No. I do it because it's one small thing that I can do to have control over this virus. There's only 2 ways we're going to stop this virus. 2 ways. One, a vaccine that our commander-in-chief says is going to happen by the end of the year, hopefully. Well, I don't want anybody to die until that time anyway. Number 2 is, although people don't completely get this, we can stop this virus by wearing facial coverings. The virus lives in a human being for anywhere, and the current understanding is, and I'll just state that, the current understanding, it'll live inside someone for about 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And then the immune system on those carriers, the immune system will kill it. It will never, it doesn't have to get out. Our own immune system will kill it. So if everyone wore a facial covering for 30 days, the virus will not likely spread. And it'll be gone. I try to understand why people don't wear facial coverings. Discomfort, disbelief, doubt, fighting for their freedom. I want you to try to be smarter than what the politicians are talking about, what the news media is talking about, and certainly what social media is talking about. If you wore a facial covering, it's the one thing you can do to shrink this virus, to shrink the issue, to not make it so overwhelming. For every one person who starts wearing a facial covering this weekend, 2 to 3 people are less likely going to carry it. So even if every single person in this world does not wear a facial covering, even if every single person, let's shrink it down. Let's shrink it to your town. Or just shrink it to my town. For every person who does not wear a facial covering, 2 to 3 people will not catch it and will not carry it and may not die from it. It's so small if we think of it that way. You gain control over something that is killing people. You gain control over something that is financially disrupting the entire world. But you gain control over it just by doing something as simple as a facial covering. Add to that a lot of hand washing, add to that social distancing, and we got this. A vaccine, the virus will be gone. Treatment, the virus will be gone. Hospitals being overwhelmed, the virus will be gone. I get the rights you're fighting for. I guess I understand there's a disbelief or distrust. The issues are overwhelming. But if we make them small, we can deal with it. And by making it small and each person taking that one step, that one small thing, before they go out to wear a facial covering, we'll crush this thing. We'll crush it. Our elderly will not die from this. Our cancer patients will not die from this. Our children will not catch this. I try to remember it's more important to understand than to be understood. I'm trying to understand, and I'm praying you do the same for me. Have a wonderful, safe, clean, and sterile weekend. Thank you, everybody.